My name is Olivia Hart, 26 years old, and I have just graduated with a master's degree in finance from the University of Michigan. I thought that finally, I would have a moment to be recognized by my family. But right at my graduation dinner, the secret I had kept for so long was exposed, the more than $10 million I had earned through hard work and investment. Instead of being proud, my parents and sister turned on me, accusing me of being selfish and demanding that I hand everything over to my sister Sophia because she deserves it more. In that moment, I broke down in tears, but I also stood up for myself for the very first time. This money is mine. I worked for it. No one has the right to demand it. I walked out of the restaurant, cut all ties, and began the journey of reclaiming my true worth. Have you ever found yourself in a situation like mine, where your own family refuses to see your efforts and only treats you as a tool to be used? Let me know where you are watching from in the comments, so I know I am not alone. My family was middle class. We were not wealthy, but we were not struggling either. We lived in a 2-story house in the suburbs of Detroit, with a small backyard where my mother often showed off her flowers to the neighbors. I remember my childhood vividly, and if there was one feeling that overshadowed everything, it was the sense of being abandoned inside the very home I was supposed to call family. I used to believe that if I just worked hard, behaved well, and achieved good results, I would earn the recognition I longed for. But I soon realized that none of my efforts mattered, not because they lacked value, but because I was not Sophia, the golden girl of my parents. The clearest memory, and perhaps the deepest wound, was the day I won the state math competition at 12 years old. I had practiced endlessly, solved countless difficult problems, and finally outperformed hundreds of other students to take first place. I waited for that moment, hoping to see my parents in the audience, clapping and smiling with pride. But when my name was called on stage, the seats reserved for parents were empty. They hadn't come. I stepped down with the certificate in my hand, forcing a smile to hide the sadness. When I got home, instead of hearing congratulations, I only heard my mother calling out from the kitchen, "Go eat." We were busy today, so we couldn't make it to the school. My heart sank. I tucked the certificate away in a drawer, and in that moment I understood. In their eyes, I would always be a shadow. It was completely different with Sophia. When she was only 8 years old and won a drawing contest at her elementary school, a prize so small no one would remember it, my parents threw a big party. They called the relatives, rented out a restaurant, and bragged endlessly about her natural artistic talent. I sat in the corner, watching Sophia glowing in a brand new pink dress, clutching a tiny trophy in her hand, while adults took turns praising her like she was a prodigy. No one asked about the math certificate I had earned just months before. My whole world seemed to shrink into a silence where I learned to swallow my tears. Birthdays were another clear example of that favoritism. For Sophia, every year there was a multi-layered cake, balloons, expensive gifts, and a crowd of friends. For me, ever since I turned 10, it was only a symbolic present, sometimes a cheap notebook, sometimes a pen. Whenever I felt hurt, my mother would speak in a sweet but reproachful tone. "You're older now, you should understand. Your sister is still young, she needs more encouragement." At first, I tried to believe her, thinking I was the older sibling, so I should yield. But year after year, that yielding turned into invisibility. I wondered if there would ever be a day when I, too, would get a party with candles and flowers, just to feel loved like a real child. In those years, I slowly developed the habit of dimming my own presence. I spoke less, expressed less, demanded less. When Sophia got a new toy, I would simply sit quietly with a book. When the family gathered to take pictures around her, I would slip into the background, so no one would have to mention me. I didn't want to be a bother, nor did I want to hear another comparison. The small bedroom upstairs became my only refuge. It was where I devoured thick books, worked on math problems, wrote in my journal, and imagined a different future. A future where I could stand on my own, without waiting for anyone's approval. There were nights when I cried silently into my pillow, all because of a careless remark from my father. Sophia is truly smart. Olivia is just hardworking. Those words cut into me like a knife, a reminder that no matter how much I tried, I would never be good enough to be loved. I asked myself over and over if they even noticed what I did, or if they deliberately ignored it, because in their eyes, only Sophia was worthy of pride. In that darkness, the only person who pulled me back from feeling completely lost was my grandmother, Nancy. She often came to my room at night, bringing a cup of warm milk and a gentle hug. She never overlooked my achievements, no matter how small. When I scored well on a test, she would write me a little card. When I was nervous before a big exam, she would sit for hours listening, then stroke my hair and say, "You deserve to be loved, Olivia, whether your parents see it or not. Don't let their silence make you doubt yourself." To me, her words were more valuable than any prize. She was like a small lamp lighting up the dark corners of my life, reminding me that I wasn't completely invisible. It was because of her that I learned to believe in my own worth, even when my own family tried to deny it. She planted in me the conviction that real love doesn't come from comparison or favoritism, but from acceptance and respect for who you are. Every time I felt like giving up, I would picture her by the window, the light shining across her silver hair, and I knew I couldn't collapse. I still had myself. I still had dreams to chase. And yet, even with her by my side, the wound inside me only grew deeper with time. I learned to hide the pain, but it never went away. It pulsed quietly beneath the surface. I knew I couldn't live forever in Sophia's shadow, but as a child, I had no choice. All I could do was keep trying, hoping that one day something might change. And as I grew older, I realized, if I didn't take the first step myself, no one was going to hand me a way out of that cycle. High school was both the brightest and the loneliest time of my life. I poured everything into my studies, as if that were the only key to escaping the invisible cage of favoritism. I didn't spend afternoons hanging out with friends like Sophia did, nor did I dream of dates under the glow of the school stage lights. I chose the library, tutoring rooms, and long nights at my desk until the early hours. As a result, my grades were nearly perfect, my GPA almost flawless, and my teachers always looked at me with admiration. But that admiration only existed within the walls of school. The moment I walked home and the door shut behind me, everything reset. I was Olivia, the ordinary daughter, the one for whom good grades don't matter, while every word of praise quickly shifted back to Sophia. While I had to push myself endlessly, Sophia was sent by my parents to an expensive private school, one with tuition so high that most families in our neighborhood could only shake their heads. They couldn't afford it, but they took out loans and cut back on other expenses just so Sophia could wear that prestigious uniform. Her grades were nothing special, just average, sometimes even struggling to pass, but none of that mattered. Every time she brought home a report card, my mother would coo, "It's okay, my girl has artistic talent. She doesn't need to be top of the class." But with me, a single imperfect grade was enough to earn a stern look and the reminder, "You need to do better, Olivia." Deep down, I knew the scales had never been balanced. Even so, I persisted. I saw achievement as the only way to prove myself, the one ticket that could get me out of a house where I never truly felt welcome. And then the day finally came, the day I received my acceptance letter from the University of Michigan. I remember my heart pounding as I opened the envelope, the bold word "Congratulations" shining like a doorway to another world. It was a full scholarship, which meant I could finally be independent, no longer relying on a single penny from my family. I cried, but this time they were tears of joy, because at last, my hard work had been recognized somewhere. I rushed downstairs, letter in hand, eager to share this moment with my parents. But when I entered the living room, they were busy getting Sophia ready for a shopping trip to pick out her prom dress. The room was filled with handbags, shoes, and swatches of colorful fabric. "Mom, Dad, I have good news," I began, but before I could finish, my mother cut me off. "Later, we're busy right now. Sophia has to pick out her dress before the store closes." I froze, the letter trembling in my hands, while Sophia's laughter echoed through the house as she chatted excitedly about gowns and glitter. They had no idea that in that very moment, their eldest daughter had just opened a new path, an opportunity that could change her life forever. That night, I sat in my small bedroom, eating a bowl of soggy instant noodles, bland and cold. In my hand was the acceptance letter, which to my family might as well have been a scrap of paper. Inside me was a crushing emptiness, but at the same time, a fierce determination ignited. I whispered to myself, one day, they won't be able to dismiss me anymore. One day, I will make them see me, whether they want to or not. That vow became a small flame, quietly burning inside me, carrying me through the countless long nights and challenges that followed. If they would never give me value, then I would create it myself, and, one day, that truth would stand undeniable before their eyes. During my final years of high school, I lived by that flame. I signed up for advanced courses, joined the math club, and competed in academic contests across the state. Each time I won, I quietly stored the trophies and certificates away in my drawer, no longer expecting my parents to change. Meanwhile, Sophia, despite her unremarkable grades, was rewarded with vacations and extravagant gifts. I saw it all, but I no longer felt the sting I once did, because I had begun to understand. I could not change them. The only thing I could change was the path I chose for myself. I poured all my desire to escape that toxic family into a single goal, leaving. I counted the days until I could finally set foot at the University of Michigan, until I could leave behind the house where I had always been invisible. Each time I heard Sophia's laughter echoing downstairs, I would close my door tightly, open my books, and whisper to myself, just wait. One day, I'll stand somewhere no one can deny me. And indeed, that silent promise made in my small room at 17 became my greatest source of strength, carrying me farther than I had ever imagined. On my first day at the University of Michigan, I took a deep breath as if I had finally escaped the heavy air of home. I knew that from this moment forward, my life would be mine to decide. I no longer had to sit behind a closed door, listening to Sophia's laughter, nor did I have to wait for recognition from people who had never truly seen me. Of course, the road ahead was not easy. Even with a full scholarship, I still had to cover most of my living expenses on my own. While many of my classmates had parents who sent them monthly allowances, I managed by working part-time at the school library, shelving books while sneaking in moments to study. Some nights I worked until late, my legs aching from standing for hours, but when I held that paycheck in my hands, my heart warmed. It was clean money, earned by me, with no one able to say I owed them gratitude or debt. My college life was nothing like most people imagined. I didn't go to loud parties, nor did I take weekend trips. My schedule revolved around lectures, the library, and my dorm room. Mornings were spent in long classes, afternoons at my part-time job, evenings buried in assignments and research papers. Sometimes, I felt a pang of loneliness looking out the window at groups of classmates heading to bars or wandering the city. But I knew exactly what I wanted. I wasn't there to have fun, I was there to build a future no one could take away from me. In those tireless days, I met someone who would change my life forever. Professor Miller, a man in his 60s with silver hair and sharp, bright eyes. He taught advanced financial markets, and from the very first lecture, I was captivated by the way he spoke of economic shifts, investment strategies, and how numbers told hidden stories of greed, fear, and trust. I began staying after class to ask questions. Instead of being annoyed, he patiently explained, smiling, and gradually, a mentor-mentee bond formed between us. He often told me, Olivia, financial knowledge can take you very far, but what matters more is knowing what you want from it. At first, I didn't fully grasp the meaning of his words, but as time passed, they carved themselves deeper and deeper into my mind. It was Professor Miller who encouraged me to start investing, even with small amounts. At first, I was terrified because my savings were barely a few $100s, the kind of money that could keep me fed for a month if I had to. But he told me, you only truly understand the market when you put your own money into it. I listened. After weeks of research, I decided to buy a few shares of a technology company, which, at that time, was just beginning to gain attention. It was a shaky decision, but also the first turning point. I spent countless nights reading the news, comparing charts, learning how to analyze trends. The profit I earned at the start was small, but to me, it was proof that I could create value with my own mind. And little by little, that passion grew, becoming a driving force stronger than any praise I had never received from my family. While I was scraping by on every dollar, Sophia lived a completely different life. I overheard from my mother that she was partying nonstop, changing boyfriends like outfits, and every time she ended up in debt or failed, my parents bailed her out, pouring more money into her hands so she could start over. One time, she called me, her voice bubbling with excitement as she bragged about vacationing with friends in Miami. Then, almost as an afterthought, she sneered. "I bet you're still buried in your books, huh?" I just smiled and stayed quiet. I knew our lives were worlds apart, but I also knew that those nights I bent over my desk were laying the foundation for the day I would finally break free from the shadow they had cast over me. My college years forged in me a steel discipline and an unshakable independence. I learned how to balance work and study, how to stretch every dollar, how to put faith in myself even when no one else did. Most of all, I discovered my true passion. Finance was not just a string of lifeless numbers, but a tool for freedom, a way to prove my worth, and a shield to protect myself. I realized that success was never about trying to become Sophia or pleasing my parents. Success was about staying true to the path I had chosen. Looking back on those years, I am grateful for the hardships because they shaped me into a stronger Olivia, resilient, determined, and with a clear sense of direction. Those were the first bricks, the foundation for everything that came after. I couldn't have known then that my patience and passion would one day lead me to a financial breakthrough that would change my entire life. But even as I sat in that tiny dorm room, with a bowl of instant noodles on the desk and a thick notebook of scribbles beside me, I felt one thing with absolute certainty. I was on the right path. And no one could take that truth away from me. After holding my diploma in my hands, I knew I could never return to that house in Detroit, a place where every corner reminded me of abandonment. I decided to move to New York, the city that never sleeps, where streets glowed with endless lights and skyscrapers rose like monuments to a new world. I started my first job at a mid-tier investment consulting firm in Manhattan. Walking into the office, seeing dozens of young professionals in sharp suits, fingers flying across keyboards, I felt both nervous and exhilarated. I told myself, "Olivia, this is your chance. If you can't prove yourself here, you won't prove yourself anywhere." Work in New York was harsher than anything I had ever experienced in college. I arrived at the office at 7 a.m. and sometimes didn't leave until after midnight, long after the streets had emptied. I buried myself in balance sheets, market reports, and client presentations. At first, colleagues eyed me with doubt, the young woman from Michigan, without a wealthy family behind her. Could she possibly survive here? But little by little, through meticulous effort and relentless patience, I earned their respect. I still remember when the firm had to prepare a rushed report for a major investment fund, and it was me who spotted a critical data gap that saved the entire team from a disastrous mistake. From that day, my boss called me the gatekeeper of the numbers, and my career began to rise. Still, I never shared any of it with my family. I knew too well that, in their eyes, my success meant nothing. If I called home to say I had just gotten a raise, my mother would probably answer flatly, "Oh, really? Sophia has an art performance this week. We're all going to see it." I had been overlooked so many times that I no longer wanted to share. I kept my victories to myself, quietly saving, quietly moving forward. One of the biggest turning points came from an investment I had first considered just an experiment. During research, I stumbled upon a small startup in artificial intelligence. The founding team was young, and their product was still rough, but I saw long-term potential. I decided to put part of my savings into it, not a huge sum, but enough to make my heart race. Some colleagues scoffed, calling me reckless. But I trusted my instincts, trusted the numbers, and trusted the fire I saw in the founder's eyes. 4 years later, what I had bet on came true. That company was acquired by a tech giant for a staggering amount. My shares suddenly turned into more than $10 million. I remember that night vividly. Staring at the number on my account, I went completely still. I didn't scream, I didn't rush out to celebrate. I just sat quietly for hours, thinking of the cold instant noodles in that tiny dorm room years ago, thinking of all the times I was left behind, and whispering to myself, at last, I did it. It wasn't just about the money. It was proof that I had been right to believe in myself, even when no one else ever did. With that capital in hand, I didn't choose to spend recklessly. I stayed in a modest rental apartment in Brooklyn, commuting in an old, ordinary car. I knew that flaunting wealth would only attract curious eyes and greedy hands reaching to take. Instead, I decided to establish my own small financial consulting firm. At first, it was just me and one assistant, but thanks to the credibility I had built at my previous job and a few loyal clients, the business slowly expanded. I focused on serving high-net-worth clients, people who wanted solid, transparent financial planning. The work gave me not only stable income but also freedom. I was no longer dependent on any company, and certainly not bound by the unreasonable expectations of my family. Meanwhile, Sophia continued to live a completely different life. From acquaintances, I heard she was unemployed, spending her days partying and cycling through boyfriends. My parents still shielded her desperately, borrowing money to preserve her image as their golden girl. I wasn't surprised. They were still the same biased parents, and Sophia was still the indulged daughter who never had to take responsibility for anything. Quietly, I sent money back a few times to help them pay off debts, but I never once revealed that I had more than $10 million in my account. I knew that if they ever found out, everything would change. And so, through those years, I lived a life so simple that no outsider could ever guess the truth. I went to work in plain suits, used an old phone, and ate ordinary dinners like anyone else. To my family, I was still just Olivia, the older sister with a basic office job, nothing special. I let them believe that. I thought, as long as I had peace, the truth didn't need to be spoken. I never imagined that one day, the secret I had guarded so carefully would be exposed in the worst possible way, and that my graduation dinner, the very place I thought I would finally receive belated recognition, would instead become the stage for an inevitable confrontation. Every time I returned home, I felt an invisible distance, like a wall standing between me and them. Family meals were supposed to be moments of sharing, but in my house, they often turned into performances where my parents bragged about Sophia. No matter what she was doing, even if it was just a short art class or a temporary job she barely held on to, they would praise her endlessly. Meanwhile, I, who had managed to survive on my own and build a career in New York, was still introduced to acquaintances as, "This is Olivia, the older sister, she just works a regular office job." I sat there with a strained smile, listening to the laughter around the table, while inside I felt only a cold emptiness. They had no idea I had sat in high-stakes meetings, signing contracts worth millions of dollars. And they didn't need to know. In their eyes, I would always remain nothing more than Sophia's shadow. Sophia, on the other hand, continued living a life that would shock anyone who looked closely. She was unemployed most of the time, constantly hopping from one job to another, sometimes quitting after only a few weeks. Yet, each time I came home, I still heard my parents say, "She has talent, she just hasn't found the right place to shine." They called her intelligent, creative, and deserving of more time, more chances. I would watch Sophia laughing, clinging to my parents' arms, talking about grand plans she would never start, and all I felt was exhaustion. She was like a child who refused to grow up, and my parents spoiled her so thoroughly that every mistake came with an excuse. There were times I knew for certain they were struggling financially. The loans they took out for Sophia's private school, the mounting credit card debt from shopping for her, it all piled up. More than once, I sent money back quietly, helping them pay off debts so they wouldn't lose everything. Once, my mother called me in tears, saying the bank was about to seize the house. Without hesitation, I transferred a large sum to save them. Yet soon after, at a family dinner, I heard her say, "Olivia is the eldest. It's her responsibility to sacrifice for her sister." Not a single thank you, not even a hug, just a statement that what I did was an obligation, something expected. I swallowed the bitterness, asking myself, if I ever collapsed, would they consider it Sophia's responsibility to carry me? I already knew the answer. There were rare moments when I tried to share about my work, hoping they might, just once, feel proud of me. I would tell them about a major project my firm had completed, or about the important clients I was advising. But the reaction was always the same, a few absent-minded nods, quickly followed by questions for Sophia about her new boyfriend, or the party she had just attended. I sat in silence, sometimes sipping water to hide the sting of disappointment. I had long stopped expecting praise, but each time it happened, my heart still ached. Deep down, I still loved them. I sent money not because they demanded it, but because I didn't want to see my parents suffer. Yet that love slowly became distorted, because I realized they never truly saw me as an independent person with dreams and feelings of my own. To them, I was like a wallet shaped in the form of a daughter. They called me whenever there were debts, whenever Sophia was unemployed, whenever something needed to be bought for her. Rarely did they ask if I was doing okay, if I was exhausted, if I had anyone to lean on. I began to feel stripped bare within my own family, where love was no longer unconditional but a chain of demands and imposed responsibilities. Many nights, returning to my small apartment in Brooklyn, I sat alone by the window, staring at the dazzling city lights with a heavy heart. I had come so far, worked so hard to escape the shadow of my family, yet looking back, I still felt bound by invisible strings, the urgent phone calls, the constant reminder that the eldest must sacrifice. I wanted to love them, but I also longed to be seen. And with each passing day, I feared more and more that, in their eyes, I would never be anything but a tool. Sometimes I asked myself, am I selfish for thinking this way? Am I an ungrateful daughter for not being able to give endlessly without ever expecting anything in return? But then I remembered the nights I cried alone in my childhood room, the times my achievements were brushed aside, and I knew I was not wrong. I was only human, and I too needed love and respect. And if they could not give me that, then one day, I would have to cut this cord myself, to reclaim my true worth. The day I officially received my master's degree in finance from the University of Michigan, I thought it might be a turning point not just in my career, but in my family relationships. I had spent years quietly working, enduring being overlooked, reduced to nothing but a walking wallet. But deep inside, I still held on to one naive dream, that one day they would be proud of me. Perhaps I was foolish, but when I sent out invitations for my graduation dinner at a fine restaurant in Chicago, I hoped that at least this time, I would be acknowledged as a real part of the family. That night, the restaurant glowed with warm light. Outside, the city air was crisp, while inside, tables draped in white linen gleamed under flickering candles, their flames reflected in crystal glasses. I chose the place because I wanted to create a perfect memory, a night of elegance, something far different from the dull family dinners of the past. When I saw my parents and Sophia walk in, I stood up, my heart beating with a mixture of joy and nervousness. My mother wore a new emerald green dress, my father his old gray suit, and Sophia was dazzling in a fitted gown, her hair curled in perfect waves. She entered as if the evening belonged to her, smile radiant, eyes brimming with confidence. I took a deep breath, smiled to greet them, and pulled out chairs for them to sit. The dinner began with elegant appetizers. I shared a few stories about my time at Michigan research projects, professors who had guided me, the milestones I had worked so hard to achieve. But I quickly noticed my parents' distracted eyes, their half-hearted nods, before they turned to shower Sophia with praise over a photo she had just posted online. I swallowed the disappointment, reminding myself that at least tonight, they were here. That, in itself, was already a concession. I had brought my laptop to the dinner because on that very day I was still in the middle of negotiating an important international investment deal. I placed it beside me, glancing at it occasionally to check emails. In my mind, I was balancing two worlds: on one side, my longing for family recognition, and on the other, responsibilities I couldn't afford to miss. I thought everything would remain under control as long as I handled it carefully. But I was wrong. When I stepped away for a moment to take a call from a partner, Sophia, who had been sitting next to me, grew curious and peeked at the half-open laptop. She had always been nosy, but this time, her curiosity changed everything. I heard the sudden scrape of a chair being pushed back. When I turned, I saw Sophia standing there, her face lit up as if she had just discovered treasure. She spun the laptop around for everyone to see and shrieked, "Oh my God, look at this! Olivia's been hiding millions, while Mom and Dad suffered for me all these years." The air in the room froze. I stood there in shock, my heart pounding as Sophia pointed at the screen, where my investment accounts displayed over $10 million and several large contracts. For a few seconds, the table fell silent, then whispers began to ripple through the room. My father's brow furrowed, my mother's jaw dropped, and Sophia held her hand high like she had just won a contest. Every eye turned on me, no warmth, only a mix of disbelief and anger. You had this kind of money all along?" My mother stammered, her voice trembling, not with pride but with betrayal. "All this time your father and I broke our backs paying debts for your sister, and you just hid it away?" Before I could explain, Sophia cut in, her tone dramatic. "I knew it. She's always so cold, of course she was keeping secrets. $10 million, Mom, Dad. And I've been struggling with school fees, with jobs. This isn't fair." I opened my mouth, trying to stay calm. "Sophia, that money came from years of work and investment. I didn't hide anything, But my father slammed his hand against the table, making the glasses rattle. "Enough. We nearly lost the house while you sat on a pile of money? Olivia, you're nothing but selfish. My face burned hot, tears welling but not yet falling. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every time I had quietly sent money home to cover their debts, all of it was erased in an instant. In their eyes, I was no longer the daughter who had carried them, but a traitor who had betrayed the family. And there stood Sophia, her face glowing with triumph, as if she had finally uncovered the ultimate proof that I was the villain. The room sank into a heavy silence after my father's outburst. Dozens of eyes filled with shock, anger, and curiosity pierced through me like 100 sharp needles. I could hear the clatter of knives and forks being slammed onto plates, the scrape of chairs being pulled back, and then my mother's voice shaking, yet burning with fury. "You have to give it to Sophia. She deserves it more. She's fragile, she needs help. You've always been strong, you don't need nearly as much." I froze. I had endured favoritism all my life, but never did I imagine that even now in the middle of a crowded restaurant, on what was supposed to be my night, my mother would still speak as if the money I had sweated and bled for was just something to be handed over to Sophia. My father's face was red as he pounded the table again. "We raised you, we fed you, we gave you an education. Now that you're wealthy, it's your duty to take care of the family. That's your obligation, Olivia. Don't be selfish." Each word fell like a hammer on my skull. Obligation. That was the word they had always used to chain me, to justify every demand for my sacrifice. No one mentioned the years I had scraped for scholarships, worked part-time jobs, and fought to survive on my own. No one mentioned the debts I had already paid for them, quietly, without acknowledgement. To them, it was as if none of it had ever happened. Sophia burst into tears, her wide eyes shimmering like an actress in a role she had played all her life. "You betrayed me, Olivia. I'm the one who needs that money. I have nothing. I can't take care of myself the way you can. How could you hide this while I've been suffering, while you were living in comfort all by yourself?" I looked at her shoulders shaking with sobs, and felt a mix of bitter amusement and pain. She had never truly suffered. Every hardship she faced had been carried by our parents, while I had long been forced to carry myself, to walk through the dark with no one to reach for my hand. I bit my lip until I tasted blood, and at last, the tears I had held back spilled over. For the first time, I didn't stop them. My voice trembled, but it rang out across the room. From the time I was a child, every achievement of mine was buried so Sophia could shine. I won the state math championship, and you didn't show up. I earned a full scholarship, and you ignored it. I fed myself, studied on my own, built my success from nothing. Every dollar in that account is from my own sweat and effort. No one has the right to demand it, not even you. My voice cracked, but I pushed through. I don't owe anyone at this table a single thing. On the contrary, for years I've been paying your debts, making your sacrifices for you. I've done everything I could, and still, in your eyes, I'm nothing but selfish. So, from this day forward, I will no longer be your wallet. I will no longer be the child forced to live in Sophia's shadow. I am myself, and I will protect what is mine. The table erupted in chaos. Other diners began turning their heads, whispering among themselves. My mother's eyes bulged wide, her face strained pale with shock. My father stammered, as if unable to believe the words I had just spoken. Sophia cried out through her tears, shrieking, "You're cruel. You don't love me at all. I'm your sister." I wiped my tears, but my voice came out calmer, as if after all these years of silence, I had finally set down the weight I'd been carrying. "Sophia, I've loved you my whole life. I've let you take everything: affection, recognition, even money. But I have nothing left to give. I'm a human being too, and I deserve to live for myself." The room descended into chaos. My mother shot up from her chair, grabbing for my arm, her voice breaking into a scream. "Olivia, you can't abandon your family. You have to think of your sister." My father thundered, "If you walk out that door, don't ever call this your home again." I took a deep breath, my chest pounding so hard it hurt. I looked around the table. Sophia's tear-streaked face, my father's rage, my mother's bitter disappointment. And I knew then that what I had longed for all these years, a shred of recognition, a glimpse of pride, was never going to come. I was left with only two choices: remain their wallet forever, or free myself. Slowly, I closed the laptop and slung my bag over my shoulder. My voice was hoarse, but steady. "Then from this moment on, consider me no longer your daughter." With that, I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard my mother's desperate cries, my father's curses, Sophia's sobs. But I didn't stop. I moved through the blurred yellow glow of the restaurant lights, my legs trembling but each step firmer than the last. Every stride tore at my heart, but also freed me from the chains that had bound me for so many years. When the door slammed shut behind me, I drew in a deep breath. For the first time in my life, I saw a painful but liberating truth. My blood family was no longer the place where I could find love or protection. And from that very moment, I knew I would have to start over, but this time, I would never let anyone strip away my worth again. After walking out of that restaurant in Chicago, I returned to my hotel drained. My body felt heavy, my mind was spinning, and my chest ached as though someone were crushing it. I collapsed by the window, staring at the city lights stretching into the distance, forcing myself to breathe evenly so the tears wouldn't fall again. I thought I had prepared myself for the worst, but when it truly happened, I realized I had never been ready for the raw pain of being rejected so completely by my own family. The next morning, my phone rang nonstop. Dozens of missed calls from my mother, my father, and numbers I didn't recognize but guessed were relatives. When I opened my voicemail, I heard my mother's broken voice. "Olivia, what's wrong with you? You can't turn your back on your sister like that. Call me back, please." Then came my father's harsh tone. "You're destroying this family. You owe us. Listen to me, come home and talk now. Don't let this go too far." My hands shook with anger as I deleted every message. But within just 2 days, it was no longer a private family matter. I discovered that Sophia had written a long post on Facebook, accusing me of being a selfish sister, wealthy, but abandoning my family, and even hinting that I was choking off her chance at life. The post spread quickly among her friends, then beyond into the wider community. Comments poured in, some expressing pity for Sophia, others condemning me, calling me an ungrateful daughter, a heartless sister. I sat there staring at the flood of notifications, my chest frozen and burning with anger. The story had been twisted, and Sophia, as always, was automatically cast as the pitiful victim. My company couldn't escape the fallout either. One morning, I arrived at the office only to freeze in place. My parents were already waiting in the lobby, their faces tight and cold. They had no regard for my privacy, dragging me aside in full view of my employees. My mother hissed through clenched teeth. "You can't let this go on. You need to set up a fund for Sophia. $10 million isn't that much. You're the older sister, you have a responsibility to share." My father's voice followed, lowered but sharp with threat. "If you don't agree, we'll make sure everyone knows just how cruel you really are." I glanced around and caught the eyes of my staff, some looking on with pity, others with curiosity. My face burned with humiliation. In that moment, I understood that if I didn't put an end to this, I would forever be dragged into their bottomless cycle of demands. That very day, I called my lawyer. Together we drafted a legal notice and sent it to each family member, warning them to cease all forms of harassment or face legal consequences. I had never imagined I would have to take such a cold, hard step against my own parents and sister, but I knew it was the only way to protect myself. At the same time, I made the decision I had avoided for far too long, ending all financial support. Sitting before my computer, I went through every transfer I had made over the years, from bank payments, emergency bailouts, to Sophia's tuition. The total made my throat tighten. I had given too much, to the point of draining myself emotionally, and never once had I received genuine gratitude. That night, I typed a short email to my parents. "From now on, I will no longer provide financial support for the family. Do not contact me to demand more. This is my final decision." My hands trembled as I pressed send, but along with it came an overwhelming sense of relief. In the days that followed, my phone overflowed with accusatory messages. Distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly appeared, throwing harsh words at me. "You have to share. Blood ties can't be abandoned. You have money, but let your parents suffer. What a disgrace." I read each line, my heart growing colder. I didn't reply. I no longer wanted to explain. Because I had come to understand, those who never lived my life would never truly understand, and I didn't need them to. At the point where I was nearly crushed by the pressure, my phone rang. It was Grandma Nancy. The moment I heard her voice, I broke down in tears. She didn't scold me, didn't demand anything. She simply said softly, "My girl, you did the right thing. You have nothing to be ashamed of. You've worked hard, and you deserve every bit of your success. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." I sobbed. "But they're saying I'm cruel, Grandma. They say I betrayed my family." She interrupted me, more firm than I had ever heard her before. "A real family is a place of unconditional love. If they only take and never give, then that's not love, it's chains, and you've broken free from those chains. I am proud of you." Her words were like medicine soothing my wounds, pulling me back from the edge of despair. I sat in silence, listening to her steady breathing on the other end, feeling warmth flow through my chest. For the first time in weeks, I realized I wasn't entirely alone. I had lost a family, but I still had someone who believed in me, who reminded me I was worthy of love and freedom. That night, I stepped onto the balcony of my Brooklyn apartment and looked out over the flickering city lights. I knew the road ahead would be hard, that I might face even more accusations, but I also knew I had made the right decision. I had drawn a boundary. I had chosen to protect myself. And for the first time in my life, I felt true freedom, the kind of freedom I had traded for a childhood of neglect and a youth spent sacrificing. 6 months after that chaotic night at the Chicago restaurant, my life had changed more than I ever imagined. I was no longer in that cramped Brooklyn rental. After careful thought, I bought a small house in the suburbs, where tree-lined streets and a green garden surrounded me. It wasn't a luxurious mansion, but it was quiet enough for me to breathe, to wake up each morning without feeling watched or demanded of. I arranged one corner of the living room into a home office, with tall bookshelves, a wooden desk, and sunlight pouring through a wide window. That's where I spent most of my time building my financial consulting firm. My clients grew, my reputation spread, and most importantly, I worked with my own hands, my own mind no longer bound by anyone. As I continued to climb step by step, I heard bits and pieces from old acquaintances that Sophia was still living as dependently as ever. She was unemployed, drifting from one fleeting romance to another, and still being shielded by my parents as though she were the same spoiled child she had always been. My parents complained to relatives about their burdens, but whenever they tried to reach me, they were met with silence. I had changed my phone number, moved my business email to a new system, and kept my lawyer handling any further harassment. No more guilt-ridden messages, no more manipulative calls. Perhaps they had finally realized that I no longer belonged to that cycle. The silence I once feared had now become my protection, like a safe wall standing between me and the past. With more free time, my thoughts often turned to Grandma Nancy. She was frailer now, her mind not as sharp as it once was, but whenever we spoke on the phone, she still reminded me, "Use your mind and your heart to do good, Olivia. Don't let old wounds harden you." Her words stayed with me, echoing in my head night after night. And so, I decided to devote myself to charitable work, especially scholarship programs for students in difficult circumstances, for children abandoned or overlooked, just as I once was. I attended seminars, listened as they spoke about their dreams, and saw my younger self reflected in their eager eyes. Each time I signed off on tuition assistance or handed over a scholarship, my heart warmed. It was my way of transforming pain into value so that someone else wouldn't have to endure the same loneliness I once knew. In my new home, I gradually found the peace I had long craved. In the mornings, I sipped coffee on the porch, watching sunlight scatter across the tree-lined streets. In the evenings, I wrote in my journal, or simply sat still, listening to the wind. No more relentless calls, no more reproachful words. Only me and Olivia, who was whole, stronger, and freer. Sometimes I sat alone, reflecting on the years that had passed, and realized money had never defined me. Whether it was 10 million or 20, those were just tools. What truly set me free was the boundary I had dared to draw. When I refused to be exploited, when I said no to injustice, that was the moment I reclaimed my true worth. And I know there are many out there living through what I once endured, abandoned by family, overlooked, treated as a burden or a tool. If you're listening to my story now, I want you to know this: you are not alone. I once sat in the dark too, crying quietly because I felt I would never be good enough, believing that family meant giving until I was empty. But the truth is, you are worthy of love and respect simply because you are you. Your success, whether small or great, is yours, and no one has the right to take it away. If you too have ever been abandoned by your family, remember this: you do not need to prove your worth to those who refuse to see it. You can step out, build your own life, and find another kind of family, a community of friends, colleagues, mentors, or even your own stronger self, people who will truly value you for who you are. I found freedom when I finally let go of the expectation that my parents would change, and it was in that very moment of letting go that I truly grew up. My story doesn't end with sweet reconciliation, but with a decisive choice. Yet that choice is what brought me to where I belong, a place without blame, without favoritism, only me and my true worth. And if you're hesitating now, if you're bound by the distorted chains of family ties, believe me, you have the right to walk away. You have the right to reclaim your life. And when you do, you will discover freedom is worth more than any amount of money.